feel like it's important to address certain things of what are you afraid of? Those things, who are the giants to you? Who are those giants of fear to you that stand in your way? And I believe that it's perhaps some things that we all deal with to a certain point. So today's title is called Fear of Not Mattering. Fear of not mattering. Where do our fears come? Do you ever think about where your fears actually come from? And they come from the depth of your heart. And three particular areas that our fears come from. One of them is we're conditioned to be fearful. We're not born with it in that sense, but we do adapt. We do acquire. Have you ever acquired a fear? Did you ever think about that? That, how many times I can remember raising our kids, and I remember Angie in particular. Angie was not afraid of the dark. I mean, it could be so pitch black in there when she was young. But you know what? Something happened later on. That kids, what they weren't afraid of before, now all of a sudden they're afraid. And then you find out perhaps it's because of a certain conditioning or an experience, right? That's why we don't want kids to have bad dreams, because all of a sudden they don't want the lights to go out. So part of it's our conditioning, our bad experiences, our history, our background, our environment. Sometimes it's not what you were taught, it's what you caught. It's not even your parents that were, teaching you to be fearful. Although when we grow up, how many times the little subtleties, be careful, son, you might get hurt if you do that. Hey, get down off of there. Get off of there. You're going to fall and break your neck. All those things that we do as a parent, it's all in the conditioning. So our fears can come out of those. And ironically, that's almost kind of the way then our perspective of life. And then when we become parents, we can also, carry on those particular fears and impose them on our own children, on the next generation. And I believe that happens in the church. I believe it happens in families. All of those things. We react to things. And then we react out of fear to say, this is not going to happen again. We think that's wise and prudent. And it can be wise and prudent. We should learn from those things. But may it never be solely and totally because I'm just afraid. Okay, so I'm getting padlocks on all the fences, and nobody's ever going to break in and violate me again. Well, what happens is with that, you have a certain closure at that front, but then what happens is before you realize it, you're closing up to other things too. You really are. It's crazy. So our conditioning, our fears can come out of just our conditioning, our upbringing, our background, and so on. Secondly, it can come from our need to hide things, our need to conceal, our concealing of things. And this goes back in the beginning. How was Adam and Eve? How did they respond when they knew that it was wrong for them to be naked? They realized they were now shamed and they were exposed. And what did they do? Their first response was, we need to hide. They were afraid. They heard God walking in the garden. They heard God coming as he normally would on a daily basis. That God would come and visit with them. And on that particular day, they heard God. And instead of stepping up, they wanted to hide. Because on that day, it was different. So we conceal things. How many of us, out of fear, we will hide the real you? And we will do that too. We don't want to open up all the way. Our fears come from basically we put a spin on our life, right? We kind of put, especially as you first starting to get to know someone, you might just kind of frame your life a certain way. And because you're putting up all those things, like the image of who you are in the first year of that relationship is a lot different than maybe in the 5th year of that relationship. And, that's why we sometimes wonder, wow, I've been married for 5 years. How come I didn't see that earlier? You just continue to open things up. So concealing. Fear comes from our concealing. The third thing is our controlling. Simply, it's our need to control. We try to control everything. That's why being fearful and living a fearful life and letting that be your MO, the way you operate, that's why you turn into a control freak, because you realize it's impossible to control everything. And so it's a lifetime pursuit that you will never fulfill. So what are we afraid of? What are we afraid of? Afraid of, people are afraid of snakes. Any people afraid of snakes? Spiders, heights, dentists. You talk about that conditioning thing. I hate dentists. You know why I hate dentists? Because they hurt me at a very young age. Some of you may not be aware of this, but I have a false tooth right in the front. I had that tooth knocked out. It was thrashed. Knocked out on Thanksgiving morning. At a little family gathering on Thanksgiving morning, and my cute little nephew, he just decided to play games and threw this toy right at my mouth. I'm coming up out of the sleeping bag, all of us sleeping on the floor, turned my head, and bam, right there. There it was, and just shattered my front tooth. So, of course, I was about 7 years old, and I had to go to the dentist. And especially way back then, what was it, 1960, 1961? Oh, it was fun to go to the dentist then. And so anyway, it was traumatic. It just was. And here I am, 63 years old, and I still don't want to go to the dentist because I get afraid. So I put on my list, dentist, death. Some are afraid of having kids. Some afraid of running out of money, afraid of failure, afraid of appointment. Like disappointing your parents, disappointing God, disappointing your spouse, afraid of violence. Today, we've got a whole different set of fears, right? We really do. We have a whole different set of fears, based on what's going on globally. And some people really do fear that. Some people fear God. In a scary way, not in a good way. That keeps them away. People fear their future. So all of these things we have. So in other words, doesn't it seem like this is almost part of our DNA? Isn't it? It's just so there every day. You could preach this thing every week and it would be relevant to something. But I want to preach to you today about we have fears of not mattering. There are people, and maybe some of us are sitting here that have had to deal with this, that we've had feelings, we've had fears that I'm not sure I make a difference. I'm not sure that my existence really matters. And if it does, to whom? And how much? And would it really matter if I just didn't show up tomorrow? How much would it really matter? And I do believe this is one of those things where the enemy challenges our belief that God really, really does love you and that God is really mindful of you and that you really do matter to him, because it spills over into that. It's estimated that there have been about 1,600 people that have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And that's just an estimate. Probably higher. And perhaps if there are survivors, it might be a higher number than the one I'm thinking of. But I only know of two. I do know of two people. I don't know them personally. I was reading about them. Two particular young men that survived the jump. One of them was by the name of Ken. I'll just say his name is Ken. He's 28 years old. He was married. He had a young child. And he decided to take his life, try to take his life by jumping off the Golden Gate. That was back in 1986. This is all well documented. You can look it up. And then there was another young man that I was struck by. He also a survivor. And they had a couple of things in common, even though Ken jumped in 1986. Kevin, his name is Kevin. Kevin was 20 years old. And Kevin decided to jump in the year of 2000. And of course, as survivors, we can, they were subject to interview and to find out what in the world was going on before they jumped, when they were jumping, and now since then, after they have survived the jump. There's one thing that they had in common. And one of it, there was this theme within both of their lives that they felt like, now, again, yes, there were mental things. One could have been diagnosed with bipolar and depression and anxiety and all of those things that we would put a label on it. But yet, deep down inside, the bottom line is they wanted to believe that they mattered to people. They mattered to the ones that loved them. Kevin, he would be told all the time, I love you. Ken would be told all the time from his wife and even from his dad. He didn't have a bad family life. They would tell him, Ken, we love you. His wife would tell him, Ken, I love you. And nothing would go in. He couldn't seem to believe her. He wanted to. But he had this deep-seated internal conviction that it doesn't matter and no one loves him, and he felt useless. Both of them felt useless and unneeded and not uncared for, but just insignificant. And what we do know too is that they both said this. When they were telling their story, both of them telling their story and mentioning how, like Kevin, he was on the railing there waiting to jump, wanting to jump. And he kind of made this little pact. If somebody, and I mean, he showed emotion. He was showing emotion. He was riding the bus on the way to the bridge, riding the city bus on the way to the bridge, and he's crying. I mean, he's weeping. For 40 minutes straight, he's just crying. And then he gets to the bridge and he makes this pact and he says, if somebody will just stop and ask me how I'm doing, is there anything I can do? If one person will just ask me, I won't jump. So 40 minutes goes by, and finally this young lady comes up, walks up to him, looks at him. He's crying. He's very clearly, visibly distraught. And she walks up and says, excuse me, would you mind if you took my picture? So he said, okay. So he takes her picture. And then she went on her way. So that's it. That was his answer. For him, that was his answer. So finally, what they do is they stand there they put their hands on the rail and they leap over the rail. And both of these guys, both Ken and Kevin, they grab the rail, they leap over the rail, and they are falling, and they've estimated it takes 4 seconds at over 75 miles an hour to hit that water. And in that 4 seconds, both Ken and Kevin, they go over that rail, and their first thought was the deepest regret that they ever felt in their life, that they knew they had made a mistake and they couldn't reverse it. So why am I saying all this? I'm saying this is a very real thing, and you can't assume, because like with Ken was just the opposite of Kevin. He wasn't crying. He was serious. Nobody would have ever had any external evidence that there was anything wrong with the man. But again, this is what goes on in people's hearts. This is a very real thing, that people can feel like that their life, even though they can have everything going for them. Kevin had everything going for him. It wasn't a bad life. Ken had everything going for him. It wasn't a bad life. There was nothing they could point out. But yet, there's this deep-seated thing in that of fear of not mattering. All right, let's go to our Bibles. Because Jesus, of course, addresses this, of how much you're loved, how much you matter. And I think this is an important message to realize. It's not just you that matters. I think it should impact our whole vision and perspective of other people too. Because we can casually or flippantly say, well, God loves everybody. But do we mean that? Do we love them? That's great, God loves them. I don't know about me. But everybody matters. Everybody matters. I mean, I understand all the activism today. I understand all the unrest about, justice today and racial justice and, all of this stuff and what's going on with the national anthem and, and everything. I get all of that. But then again, listen, everybody matters. Black Lives Matter, that's a movement, and black lives do matter. But the problem is, it isn't just black lives. All life matters. All life matters. And it impacts and affects all of us, the value of life, including the womb. I mean, part of it is, it's just another consequence. It's just another thing that happens when we devalue life. And yeah, it works into race. It works into economic levels. It works into people that have homes and people that don't have homes. And, people that do crimes and people that don't do crimes. And all of that. We understand that, right? But this is about that everybody matters. Jesus said in Matthew 10:31 in the New Century Version, he told them, don't be afraid. Isn't it interesting? He puts that phrase in there. Don't be afraid. You are worth much more than many sparrows. Now, I'm not adding the context to this. You can look it up in Matthew 10, but there's definitely a context here. It's not about just comparing you to birds. Okay? But Jesus is trying to say that you are the most valued of all. The fact of the matter is, mankind, Jesus didn't die for the birds. I'm sorry, but Jesus didn't die for the dogs, didn't die for Jeter. He died for mankind. He died for his masterpiece of creation that he chose to create in his own image, unlike any other living creature. Those lives are absolutely more important than, you can say, the sparrows, the lions, the dogs, everything that doesn't have the image of God, that's not mankind. Everything and everyone that he didn't go to the cross for. He didn't go to the cross for them. He went to the cross for that which he values the most, which is you, which is mankind. So he's saying, don't be afraid. You can get fearful. So my question to us is, do we matter? Do we matter? Do you believe you matter? Let me ask you this. What would be a description of success? People might say, I want to succeed. I want to live a life and I want to succeed. And I can tell you that there's probably something deeper inside of you than success, than a hunger or desire or drive for success. You know what we really want is significance. That's what we want. Because through it all, we fear. We fear nothingness. We fear insignificance. We fear evaporation. If I die tomorrow, how much difference would it make? And to whom? I'm coming and going, and no one seems to know. That's the way those guys felt on the bridge. They're just one of many in the masses, and nobody seems to know. So ask yourself this, why? Why do you crave? When we do, let's be honest, there's something inside of us where we crave a little bit to be noticed. It doesn't have to be by everyone. I'm not saying that. But we all have within us that we want to be acknowledged. We want to be noticed. Don't you love it? Really? People do love it. Even in marketing these days and business practices, what do they say is one of the most important things? Call them by name. That's been one of the biggest challenges of ministry. Because pastors like me and ministers like me, we go around and we go, I'm terrible at names. I'm terrible at names. I'm terrible at names. But the thing is, we know how critical that is. To know names. And to call someone by their name. There's something about calling them by their name. I've tried to almost make it a practice, and I'm getting a little better at it. But sometimes I will just, every time I go out to eat, I'll ask the waiter or the waitress, what is your name? She'll say her name. He'll say his name. And then I have to remember it. Because it's so important. But see, something happens where all of a sudden a stranger is no longer a stranger. Isn't that crazy? Even though you still don't know them, but you know their name, and it just makes it feel like they're not a stranger anymore. And they feel acknowledged that I'm not a waitress or a waiter or a server, whatever you call them now. And that's the problem with titles. The name will never change. They're always that name. But titles come and go, and that's why they're not really don't mean that much. But we crave it. We crave the attention of our spouse. We crave the affirmation from an authority figure. Come on, we do. We want to hear. Why do you think it is, even in Christendom, even when you think about us as a Christian, how many of you you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of us deep down inside, one of the most greatest things would not be, oh, I get to go to heaven. Oh, I get to have a mansion. Oh, I get this, I get that. But how many times would it be the words from the Father where he says, well done, good and faithful servant, Mary. And hear your name. Hear your name. I'm telling you, that's heaven itself right there. Why? Because you've been affirmed. It has resonated inside of you that he noticed me. He noticed me. I mattered, and what I did here on earth mattered, and who I was mattered. And the one person I wanted to please more than anybody, that's all that matters. Rick Warren used to say, you live for the audience of one. And yet, I'm talking about human need here. We still want it from the ones that love us. This is why we crave it. Do you ever meet someone who we would call a name dropper? Huh? A name dropper. We love to do that. We love to talk about, like, if we just, if we just said, excuse me, if we just said, well, like, have you met any, again, you just raise your hand, have you met any celebrities? Have you run into anybody famous? And then you're talking to them, and they're talking, and their eyes are lit up. Like, wow, I got to see so-and-so, and she shook my hand, and, I got an autograph. I got this, I got that. And it's in your room, and you look at it, and what is that? That's value. That's significance. And it's you who has it. And so you love to go out and drop that name. My sister Elda, she actually got to go to a concert where Elvis Presley was. See, even that, ooh, wow. That's what happens when you drop names, or, hey, I got to go golfing with da-da-da. Yeah, Curry, he got to go golfing with Obama. And that's a cool name to drop, right? You got to do that. Yeah, as if he needs any more significance. But, basketball player, MVP, championship ring, all that stuff. But he got to golf with Obama. Come on. Dropping that name. Why do we love our class rings? Some of you maybe you get a college ring. Or what college did you graduate from? I graduated from some little school in New Mexico, or I got to graduate from a little school in Mississippi, it had about 200 people, big deal. Well, I got to graduate in Notre Dame. Oh, there's a name to drop. Notre Dame, Harvard, Yale. Ooh, the elite. Why is that? That is all the drive and the hunger for significance. That's why the rings are important. Everybody, even the professional millionaires, athlete millionaires, they've got all the money in the world. But you know what they really want? I've got a ring. Hey, come on. Yeah, I'm a professional athlete. I'm a multimillionaire. I can live anywhere I want. I can be with anybody I want. I can do anything I want. But I still don't have a ring. Not that I'm going to feel sorry for Charles Barkley, but, the poor guy, he's done a lot of things, but he still has no ring. We do. We want to hang our sign on the door. We want to be visible. We want to be noticed. Yes, we do. How about fashion? Am I being fashionable today? Am I being a name dropper? Yeah, I'm being a little bit of a name dropper. Of course, my Yankees lost, so it's okay. I determined I was going to wear it, win or lose. But see, I want to wear it. I want to identify with it. But when you're wearing, like fashion designers, It cracks me up what goes on with designer. Now names, designer names. You know, when I'm growing up, it was Levi Strauss. That was it. Come on. Levi Strauss. Woo, cool, man. That beats Wrangler. Yeah. Levi was the gold standard. Not anymore. Now you've got all these names, you know. I can't believe you're going to spend 80, 90, $100 for a pair of jeans because it's got that name. It's got the name on it. And believe me, that's by design. They are exploiting your desire for significance. They absolutely are. They're going for it. They're digging in. In fact, they say this. Fashion designers tell us, this is a quote, "You'll be somebody if you wear our jeans. Stick our name on your rear end and insignificance will vanish." Wow. Are they bold or what? So again, I just have to ask. I'm making a case that yes, because I know some of you be, I don't hunger that, I don't crave that, that's not me. But it's just all over. Why our fascination with sports franchises and athletes? How many times, people they think they're a fan. Fan is just short for fanatic, right? They're fanatics, and we want to identify. We want to buy the shirt. When they lose, the Yankees lost last night. I can go to bed at night and be depressed because I feel like I lost. Believe me, it's a lot better than it used to be. When I was younger in my 20s, I would get sick to my stomach. I couldn't sleep at night. I would be replaying the game. I didn't even play it in the first place, but now I'm playing it. I'm in it. But we do. We identify with actors and artists and musicians. We like relating and identifying with winners. With winners. So, like I was talking about my sister going to an Elvis concert. Elvis in the early 70s, before he died, the early 70s, died in 77. And, he always had a scarf around his neck. And of course it was the one thing that everybody looked forward to because Elvis was going to give that scarf away at the end of his concert or near the end. He would take that scarf off his neck and throw it out into the crowd. Yeah. So if you're that person, all right, I'll tell you what my claim to fame is. This won't mean a thing to anybody, so it's safe. The one thing I got to do, you remember a show called Daniel Boone? Oh, good, yeah. All of you over 50 answered that question. Daniel Boone, the lead actor, Fess Parker. Biggest dude. That guy is big. He's over 6'7". He's a big boy. And I'm going through, of all things, in the early 70s, I'm going through the airport in San Jose. And I'm walking along, and I've got luggage, and I'm walking through, and I'm not sure where I'm going. And I turn my head back a little bit, and bam! I bumped into this guy. I literally bumped into him. I bumped into him, and he didn't move. And I look up at him, and I see his face, and he just gave the biggest smile down at me. And I said, "Excuse me." And he said, "It's all right." And then he kept walking, and then I realized who it was. At that moment, then it was like, what? Wow, that was Daniel Boone. Sometimes in even our motives, we will sometimes have kids for the same reason. We take a lot of pride in our kids. Parents don't want to admit this, but we sometimes will live through our kids. We will hey, I failed at this, they're going to succeed at this. And that's okay to believe and encourage them in the success of something that they really love and have passion for. But we have to be careful that we're not just feeding our own ego and our own drive and our own sense of failure at trying to be significant in something. Anyway, throw that out for free. Now, it's like, how many grandkids do you have? Hey, I have one grandchild, and she's the best. Life is important. Life is significant. What we do here, who we are producing something that God has purposed and planned for us. But we need to know that we do matter. Everything that we are, everything that we do matters to God, and we will and do make a difference. Jesus said, don't be afraid. Do you realize how valuable, please realize how valuable you are and how valuable life is. There's an atheist by the name of Bertrand Russell, and hopefully, we know that this guy, he is wrong when he says this. I believe that when I die, my bones will rot, and nothing shall remain of my ego. In other words, he's got nothing else going for him. That's it. But what does Psalm 14:1 say? Psalm 14:1 says, only a fool would say there is no God. It's a foolish thing. It's a foolish thing. So let's look at Jesus' words again in Matthew 10:29 in the CEV. I'm looking at Matthew chapter 10, verse 29 to 31. He says this, aren't 2 sparrows sold for only a penny? But your Father knows when any one of them falls to the ground. Well, he's even mindful of the little bird. You think about that the next time you see some roadkill. Instead of, ew! God is mindful of everything, every living thing. But yet, then he goes on to say, but you're more valuable than them. But then he says this, even the hairs on your head are counted. So again, he gives this message. So don't be afraid. You are worth much more than the sparrows. Now, we'll close by just looking at this for a second. What in the world is with Jesus including hair in here as a talking point of value? Jesus is presenting the hair. He's presenting the follicles of hair as a talking point to how important you are, because he looks at your hair and he even counts your hair. Come on. Does anybody have a hair counting business in here? Does anybody ever see that in the yellow pages? Hey, you want to hire me to count hair? Yeah, we've got accountants. We're concerned about what's on the scale, how many pounds we weigh. We're concerned about, other calculations and crunching other numbers. Think about our society. We count everything. You count things in your closet. You count, money. Of course we count money, right? We want to know how much gas is in our tanks. But the hair, do you count the hair on your skin?
because he keeps track of it. Come on. Come on. This is not an exaggeration. This is how mindful of God is for you, that God knows you so intimately and you matter so much that the kind of things, and that's why don't be afraid to pray whatever you pray. Because sometimes you will pray something, oh, God doesn't care about that, God doesn't care about that. Oh, this is so trivial, this is so minor, this is so insignificant. Oh, I can't pray for my dog. I mean, come on. God doesn't care about the dog. God cares about what you care about. You bring it to him. He cares so much. Even the hairs on your head are counted, so don't be afraid. We value everything else, and yet God values even us so much that he is posting and he is documenting the amounts of your hair loss. You matter to God. Everything. Let's get rid of these feelings of smallness. Because I'll tell you right now, it blows my mind to now, especially in the science field. What science is teaching us now is how big the galaxies are. And that there are not just billions of stars, there are billions of galaxies. And I guess it continues to blow my mind that one part of their discovery that they can't seem to talk about yet is that there's still nothing like Earth. Come on, right? So it blows my mind that God cares so much. It appears that God, with all of that, still cares for the smallness of Earth. Why? Because it has his most valued treasure on it. We're almost like hair follicles on the earth. And he counts them all. And he knows them. He wants to know them intimately. You matter. And I can say this right now. I feel like I need to say this. Listen. If any of you are in here with suicidal thoughts, if any of you are here and you would be sitting there going, they have no idea what I'm thinking. They have no idea what I'm going through. No one, that's what these two guys talked about. They realized no one knew their secrets. And the only thing we can do with this is listen, appeal to people. If you need to talk to someone, you're not okay. Come on. I want to know if you're okay. I care. You do matter. And let's pray. Let's believe. Let's believe and hear how much you're loved and how much you do matter and care. Talk to somebody. Say something. Let's pray.